Welcome to the 1 Minute Apologist. We interview the world's leading apologists to provide credible answers to curious questions. When it comes to being a Christian, some people could offer up the objection to you saying, you know, Jim, why is it that you're a Christian and how can you know for sure that Christianity is true? Granted, you feel good about your Christianity, and that's great, but there are so many other faith alternatives. How do you know that maybe something else isn't true?
Yeah, you know, you do a book on when you're examining closely the claims of the Christian gospel writers, and then someone will ask you in a Q&A afterwards, hey, did you do the same investigation with Islam, or did you do it with some other, how do you know? Why'd you stop? I mean, if you haven't examined every single possible claim about God, how could you know this one's true? And I think when you first hear that kind of an objection, it seems rhetorically powerful. But I think if you really think it through, as a guy who works criminal cases, I work cases where people have done murders. And let's say the suspect was described as a white male of about 6 feet high. Well, that describes both of us. And I work through a few suspects and I find the guy who, all of a sudden, all the evidence seems to make sense given this particular defendant. I don't then stop and say, well, you know what, I've got 40 pieces of evidence that all point to this guy. I've got his fingerprints at the scene, I've got his DNA, I've got witnesses. But you know, there are still another 2 million white males of that height in my county. So should I examine the other 2 million white males in my, no, of course not. This guy is clearly the best inference because all the evidence points to him. So we stop there. And we don't get to trial later on and say, well, you know, you can't trust that that's your guy with the 20 pieces of evidence that point to him because there's still 2 million guys you didn't examine. So I think in the end, the real question is really simple. Do I have a good evidential reason to believe that this is the correct suspect? To stop the investigation here because it's overwhelming. So I would say the same thing about Christianity. If the evidence is overwhelming and it brings me here, and it all points to this, to the reliability of the Gospels, whatever the criteria we're going to use, then it doesn't make sense to say, well, I can't trust it until I examine every other possible configuration. Again, if the evidence is strong, we're done.